Hi, this is Danny D, and welcome to Pathways of Hope. Join me as I reflect on today's Gospel from Matthew 9, verses 1 to 8. Jesus invites us to get to know Him a little bit more through this passage. It says Jesus was on a boat crossing to go home back to Capernaum, where He lived at that time. Now, some people brought the paralytic to Him to be healed. He saw their faith, it says. And He said, "Courage, child, your sins are forgiven." Now, let's stop here for a while. I'd like to offer two reflections I believe that Jesus wants to remind us about today. Point number one, Jesus is reminding us to love. People brought to Him this paralytic lying on a stretcher. You know, a paralytic cannot move by himself. He needs people who love him enough to carry his limp, heavy body across town. He needs people to love him enough to bring him to Jesus, knowing that for sure Jesus could heal him. Jesus saw their faith, turns to the paralytic, and He heals him. We need this kind of faith. Much more, we need this kind of love. Now, I pray that we be surrounded by people who love us this way. And I also pray that we get to love people around us this way too, our families, our friends, especially those who are more difficult to love. I pray that we find joy in loving others enough to bring them before Jesus. Point number two, that Jesus is God. And how well we live our lives will depend on how much we believe in this truth, that Jesus is indeed God. Now, when I was reading through this passage, I remembered somebody telling me that, look for the odd things in a passage. Usually there's a message there. And I found something really odd. Now, these friends carry the paralytic to Jesus, of course, for him to be healed. It says Jesus saw their faith and says, "Courage, your sins are forgiven." Nice. If I were their friends, I would think, it's nice that you forgive him, but we came here to hopefully that he could walk, he could be healed. Jesus did not misunderstand them. I believe He knew He could make the paralytic walk, and He did. But He also saw a teaching moment there. Right on cue when He said, "Your sins are forgiven," the scribes, who knew the law and the Torah so well, said that He was blaspheming, because they knew that only God can forgive sins. And Jesus was precisely taking this opportunity to reveal to everybody that He was indeed God. He asks, "Why are you harboring these evil thoughts? Why are you judging me and my words? Why are you unbelieving?" When he asks, which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or rise and walk? I always thought, of course it's easier to say your sins are forgiven. It cannot be proven physically. But if you say rise and walk, you'd have to have physical proof of that miracle. But if we understand deep in our hearts what the scribes knew, that only God can forgive, then we will realize that it is difficult, more even impossible, for any other human being to actually say your sins are forgiven. In fact, it is easier for Jesus to say, "Rise and walk." But Jesus was saying, when I say rise and walk, I'm not just a healer, a faith healer, but I am God. We know that this event was of God and of the Spirit by its fruits. Now, the fruits of heaven are always good: joy, love, peace. The passage ends with exactly that. The crowds saw this, they were struck in awe, and they glorified God. Now, I pray that we too can see with the eyes of our hearts, be awed, and be so transformed enough for us to love others, look up to the Father, and glorify God today. Have a great weekend.